I'm probably a day later at this point this week than I was last week getting up this video, but it seemed like after I made that preseason week 1 top performances list, you guys seemed to enjoy that, so I'm going to make another one for the week 2 of this year's preseason. I prefaced last week's video and made it known that I understand a lot of these performances. They're preseason. People don't necessarily care about them as much as maybe even practice for some of these guys. And a lot of these guys might not even be on the final 53-man roster at the end of preseason. But again, it's good, I think, to note some of these performances from some of these guys. It's some guys that are starters, some guys that are looking to just make the team. So again, I think it's just sort of a fun thing to just recognize the performances of all of these guys. I'm going to start in the AFC South, where I have two quarterbacks. CJ Stroud for the Texans, over his 2 drives, went 6 for 8, 44 yards, and a throwing touchdown. This was a pretty good bar for CJ Stroud to set. Second preseason game of the year. He was on target with his throws. He was able to get it to a lot of guys on this team. I think he had completions to 4 or 5 different receivers on those 2 drives. So it was good to see him play well in those drives. Anthony Richardson, I think his 2 drives in his last, his last chance to try to win the starting job, even though he didn't win it in Indianapolis, he had a successful 2 drives, getting 10 points on the board, 6 for 11, 73 yards. Not stats that'll blow you away, but I think I focused more on those 10 points that Indianapolis scored. It showed that he was able to lead consistent drives back-to-back times. Ventrell Miller for the Jacksonville Jaguars had a sack late in the first half that ended up setting up a field goal for the Jaguars, 4 solo tackles as well. And then Kendall Brooks, a pick 6 in Tennessee's game. The AFC West for the Denver Broncos, it was pretty easy to go with Jarrett Stidham again. He had a great week last week. He had an incredible week this week on the field, 16 for 23, 240 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Ashton Genty had his first NFL touchdown, 7 carries for 33 yards as well. Kind of had his big first moment of getting hit in the NFL, where he pretty much got stonewalled by D. Winters after a run. And he came out for a few plays. It looked a little scary because he went into the medical tent, came back out, scored a touchdown. Trey Harris, a young draft pick for the LA Chargers, 6 receptions for 85 yards. Great to see if you're a Chargers fan, somebody that is hopefully going to be one of the future pass catchers of this team, getting in a rhythm in preseason. Jeffrey Bossa, possibly the next linebacker for the Kansas City Chiefs, had 7 tackles, and one of those tackles for a loss. Over in the AFC East, we have Theo Wease Jr., 6 receptions, 80 yards, and 2 touchdowns for the Dolphins. Efton Chisholm III, one of the most fan-favorited preseason performances, not just this week, but last week he had a good performance as well. This week, 6 receptions, 71 receiving yards, and 1 touchdown. Dean Clark, he had a sack, an interception, and 6 total tackles against the Giants. Frank Gore Jr., another guy who was coming off a great performance last week. He put up another really good performance in their Week 2 preseason matchup, and he's putting in a pretty good case to be the number 2, number 3 running back on this team, a guy who can run the ball and catch the ball pretty well for a running back. So, again, a guy who is really trying to go up the depth chart with his preseason performance. To the AFC North, the Cleveland Browns' Nathaniel Watson had 3 tackles for a loss. Jake Browning went 16 for 25, 160 yards, and 2 touchdowns. He pretty much shut down any chance that Desmond Ridder had at almost even staying on the roster. There's a good chance that Jake Browning not only solidified his spot as the number 2 quarterback, but solidified that there's really no chance another quarterback would play if Jake Browning is healthy for the Bengals. Tyler Loop for the Baltimore Ravens went 5 for 6 on field goals, 2 extra points as well. He had a 53-yard field goal as his longest kick of the day. 17 total points for Tyler Loop. That's a pretty good performance. Derek Harmon of the Pittsburgh Steelers, rookie, first-round pick, got his first sack in the NFL. Over to the NFC East, Andrew Booth Jr. put in 8 tackles as well as a pick 6 in their game. Jackson Dart, in his longest outing, went 14 for 16, 137 yards through the air, and a passing touchdown. Azeez Ojulari, I believe, had a sack last week. He gets another sack, is one of these guys for Philadelphia that's going to be heavily relied on in the regular season to provide solid pass rush. Chris Rodriguez Jr. for the Washington Commanders, 6 carries for 62 yards. He did have 1 43-yard run that kind of juices those stats a little bit. But this is a guy, Chris Rodriguez, that's almost fighting for a starting spot for Washington because there's all these rumors about Brian Robinson possibly getting traded from Washington. He was held out of their Week 2 preseason game, with most of that talk kind of supporting that reasoning. And so Chris Rodriguez Jr., one of these guys trying to get a starting spot in those preseason moments, getting a chance to show what happens if he has the ball in his hands. To the NFC North, Tyson Bagent for the Chicago Bears didn't just have a great performance on the field. He went 13 for 22, almost 200 passing yards and a touchdown. He signed a new contract with the Chicago Bears off of this game. Pretty much solidified his spot as the number 2 quarterback and gives the Bears a chance to move on from Case Keenum and keep only 2 quarterbacks on the 53-man roster. Kyle Allen in back-to-back weeks for the Detroit Lions, coming off that Hall of Fame game where he really struggled. Week 3 for the Lions and week 2 in a row of Kyle Allen really showing what he can do as a backup quarterback. Isaiah Simmons of the Green Bay Packers had 9 tackles. 5 of those were solo tackles. And then Will Reichard for the Minnesota Vikings. They really didn't have much going for them in their preseason game. He was basically all of the scoring. Not really basically, he was the only scoring, with his 4 field goals and a 54-yarder being the longest one. Over to the NFC South, Lamar Jackson. Not that Lamar Jackson, but this Lamar Jackson for the Atlanta Falcons. 8 total tackles and 1 pass defense. Princely Umanmielen for the Carolina Panthers. He didn't have a sack, but he had 3 tackles, 2 QB hits. Was really the only guy on the Carolina Panthers squad for a team that put up 3 points against the Texans. There wasn't a lot going for Carolina last week. Mason Tipton, fresh off of a game where he had 1 reception for 54 yards and a touchdown. He puts in 6 receptions and 100 yards for a touchdown as well in week 2. Teddy Bridgewater kind of got signed. I don't want to say off the streets or off the couch, but Teddy Bridgewater wasn't playing football last year. And he went 6 for 11, 85 passing yards, and 2 touchdowns through the air. He is another one of these guys that's probably solidifying his spot as the number 2 guy on this roster. Over to the NFC West with the Arizona Cardinals, Blake Gilligan, I guess. The Cardinals basically did nothing in their second preseason game. And as much as this is good for Gilligan to have his good punts, it's more of a, I guess, showing of how poor that preseason game was for Arizona in week 2. Brennan Presley for the Los Angeles Rams had 6 receptions for 102 yards. Robbie Chosen, formerly known as Robbie Anderson, a guy who has a good chance to be a 3rd, 4th receiver on the Niners due to all of their injuries. He has 5 receptions for 92 yards. And Drew Lock for the Seattle Seahawks, 10 for 12, 129 yards, and 2 passing touchdowns. So yeah, there is week 2 of the preseason of the 2025 NFL season. I think this is going to be similar to something I'm going to do during the regular season. And this is a good way for me to kind of try out this format of a video. I try not to be super long in terms of the time of the video, but it is, I think, like I said, it's fun to look through all of these teams, see who performed well, and see who is trying to move up in their depth chart position and how they're going about doing it. So I'll probably do this again next week for week 3. It's probably going to be even less guys that are household names, but I'll look forward to doing it.